Right, I've now glued my little booster cushion from the foam, styrofoam. So on the underneath, I dug out the little channel that will sit on the rectangular piece on the bottom of the engine box. I've also dug out a little channel here and then just put a little like rectangular piece in there and slotted it in, because then that will go inside there and that will lock onto there like that. Oh, bollocks. Right, so that will just go on there like that. Like that. And then if you can make it out, but that fits perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blue tack the feet of the Trooper into the stirrups. I'll just blue tack them in there, and then what I'll do is I'm going to use super glue for the initial bond. Then I know it's in the right position, and then I'll give the super glue a few hours to cure, and then I'll just top it up around the edges with the Gorilla Glue. So let's see what happens. Right, I've now blue tacked the stirrups to the Scout Trooper's foot, both sides. I then turned it over, which it was actually quite a struggle, to be honest, to get it to go in. I had to turn it upside down, holding the figure in one hand and trying to press with the other while the super glue dried. And you can see it in there. And then I turned it back over, and then I've made myself a little towering inferno, as it were, to try and hold everything up. So I've had to put 2 blocks underneath there for the one stirrup. It just about rested on that paint pot on the other side. And then I've got my 2 rolls of tape, my AK Interactive putty, and 2 bits of dowel that's holding the underneath stirrup, underneath there, just underneath the block. And I've left this, I think it's 36 hours to dry. So hopefully that should be okay now. I've sprayed the hand controls on, and now I'm just gonna get ready to take all this off the Towering Inferno, so I can like test fit the control handles onto the handlebars, so I can get them in the right position. And the arms are still blue tacked in. I haven't glued those on yet, but let's see what happens when I take all that off. Right, so I've took my little Towering Inferno, as I called it, away, and taking that off there. The sponge bit that I used is absolutely now rock hard, because what I did, I put the super glue in and let it cure. But to be honest, these were still quite movable, a bit more flimsy than they am now. They're still movable, but just not as flimsy. So then I got my Gorilla Glue straight out the nozzle and put a bead all the way around, because there was a tiny, tiny little gap. So I put a bead all the way around. And around the back here, you could probably just make out that shininess there. And let that 24 hours to dry, and that is now rock hard. Also, I test fitted the bike. I test fitted the figure on the bike again with the blue tack, and I glued the hand controls on. Now, there's a little pin on the end of the hand controls here, but the hole that's already been pre-drilled is too big and too deep, and the pinhole would like jangle inside the hole, and I don't think it would have glued properly. So what I did is I put a drop of blue tack inside there, pushed it in with my knife, actually with my circular file, pushed it in the best I could, and then I put a drop of super glue in there, and then I manoeuvred the controls backwards slightly so it met underneath the hand of the trooper figure. And then I bought some more super glue because I run out of the super glue gel, and the super glue that I bought from Poundland had a tiny long thin nozzle that I could put on top of the normal nozzle, and it just seeped in there, and it's glued it an absolute treat. And these are rock hard as well. So I've done that both sides of the blue tack and the glue, and those are perfect into position with his hands. So the only thing I've got to do now for the speeder bike is put the blanket on with a ribbon and put the braking flaps on the back. That's the only thing I've got to do now. So putting that back on its stand, actually, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but inside there, where the ball joint was, there it was just a wall. So I've drilled a hole which is actually perfect to that little notch on top of there. And that little notch goes in the hole all the way in, and then that little notch here, that's perfect size for that there. It's the perfect size. As I can now demonstrate, it just sits in, goes all the way in like that. I've made that, you've probably seen it on previous updates. That's just to hold that up, because it does, if I put the bike on that, it does slightly lean forward. So I just put this underneath here just to hold it up properly. I'm going to be putting that on my diorama base, and I'm going to obviously cover that up with some flock or foliage or maybe some fern leaves. We'll see what happens. The figure, I drew a line. Actually, I can probably remove this tape now because it's been drying almost 24 hours. So if I just remove that tape, there we go, very gently. And you could probably just make out the pencil mark, because on his actual armour shoulders, there's actually a little line. Because obviously when they put the chest armour on, it would meet together at the front and back. And I just put a pencil mark when I manoeuvred the hands underneath there onto the actual handlebars. And like I said, I just put a little line on there, and basically just got the one piece of tape on the front part of the pauldron and just held it down, and then obviously the back part of the pauldron just went over his back there. And then obviously one piece on the side here. So if I just get underneath there with my knife, very gently remove that tape, that's it. And there's the other pencil mark with the line of his torso armour where it goes over his shoulder. So that's what I did for that. And I just used my normal glue for that to hold that into place. And like I said, it's been drying almost 24 hours. I mean, the glue only takes 6 hours to dry. So smooth that tape there, just hold that into place. Just pull that round very gently from his back. And then do the same for that. Whoops. Sorry about that. So those two bits of glue, two bits of tape together, so very gently pull that away. Yep, there we go. And let's see if I can get him on now. This should fit 100% perfect. So putting his what's nose on there, feet in there. Leaning forward slightly, putting his hands Gently, gently, gently over the controls. Oh, right, okay. So them haven't dried in the, unless I've got to leaning forward a bit. Right, them don't. Right. So something's happened. Whoops, something's happened there when I tie perfect. But you can see that the figure now sits on there fairly decently. I've obviously got to manoeuvre it. I can't do that with on the camera, but yeah, the bike's virtually all done and the figure sits perfectly, fairly decently correct. So let's see what happens when I can fine tune the positioning. Right, so I've done that bit of fine tuning on the manoeuvring, and I think I know why the hands met the hand controls perfectly. Because if you remember, I had the blue tack holding the arms on, and I think that gave me the extra couple of mil that I needed. So when I've took the blue tack off and glued the arms on, I've just glued it plastic to plastic. But if I'd have done it with the blue tack, obviously there would have been a massive gap. So, like I said, I think the blue tack has given me the extra positioning that I needed. And I wanted his feet and his arse to sit perfectly on the seat and the stirrups respectively. So me hand controls are slightly in front of his hands. I mean, even if I were to snap the glue on the handlebars, they would only be touching his fingers here. They would not go into the arch of his hands. It will be like below here. I mean, it's a shame, but on the other builds that I've seen with the AMT, he's standing up in the stirrups, and I don't want that. So what I really could do, this won't be an action shot where he's speeding through the Forest Endor. So what I could pass this off as, he's just got onto the bike, he's positioning himself ready to speed forward. So he hasn't quite got his hands onto the hand controls. It's a shame that they don't meet, but at the end of the day, you know, it's a stationary bike, stationary figure, and like I said, I could pass him off that he's just about to take off, and he's just getting himself into the riding position. I mean, if you look on this side as well, the foot is perfectly in the stirrup. You know, he's just positioning himself to get ready to take off, as it were. Oh well, it's a shame, but I'd rather have his hands there than have him standing in the stirrups like the other builds that I've seen on YouTube. So, it is what it is. Right. If you remember, on the back of there, well, it's an oxygen tank or whatever, I didn't want to leave it blank. Now, on the Bandai kit, you actually get a piece to put on top of there. So what I've done is I've got my super glue card, because it was at a 2-pack from Poundland, and I've cut out a bit of card, measured it, and then I've got some spares from my spare box. That was a lens that I used on the Del Boy Ford Capri, and these two little green bits, if you remember from my Munsters build, I had that wall. These were like these were like pots that went on top of the wall, decorative pots, and I've just cut the tops off them and just super glued them on. So if I can grip this now without falling into the carpet monster, there we go, and then that will sit on there like that. And then if I manoeuvre the figure forward slightly, and I can just use my knife to edge it across, and that will look like that. Obviously I've got to paint that black and then pick out the details for the little domes, but yeah, just a nice little cheap fix. And the card is, you know, probably about maybe 1.5 mil thick, and it's the perfect thickness just to fill that empty space on his back. So that's that little fix done.